Yes, sir.
My name is Doyle Wang. I am a rising freshman at Hillsdale College from my home state of Georgia. And since you said that there are moderate Muslims that are willing to speak out against jihad, is it still accurate to say that Islam in general today has become a very violent religion?
Yes, Islam actually is a very violent religion right from the beginning. All you have to do is read the Quran and see that Islam is a violent religion. It's the only major world religion that has a developed doctrine and theology and legal system that mandates warfare against unbelievers. But we have to make a distinction that is so often elided, so often not made. And the distinction is between Muslims and Islam. Jesus said, love your enemies and turn the other cheek. There are, however, very many Christians who do not love their enemies and turn the other cheek. Does this mean Jesus didn't say it? No, he still said it. It's Christianity. But many Christians do not live up to that. It's the same thing in Islam. Islam teaches warfare against and subjugation of unbelievers. The Quran says Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are merciful to one another, but ruthless to the unbelievers. That's chapter 48, verse 29 of the Quran. That's in the Quran. That's the teaching of Allah as far as Muslims are concerned, the supreme God. Whether or not any individual Muslim takes that seriously or puts that into practice, that is a different question altogether. People have a variety of influences. You yourself may be very religious or not very religious, or you may be interested in religion, but you also have other things that you're interested in that conflict in various ways. These things are all part of human development, and every individual is different. So you cannot assume that any Muslim holds to all these things and is an active jihadi. But does that mean that Islam does not teach jihad, warfare against, and subjugation of unbelievers? Unfortunately not. It does teach it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Michael Bezoyan, UCLA. My question is, given the conflict between Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, how do you see this ending? Because if the religion calls for conquest, then unless you put an end to the religion, there's always going to be this ongoing desire for converting the non-believer, either through jizya or just by killing the non-believer.
Just by way of explanation, Dar al-Harb is the house of war. Dar al-Islam is the house of Islam. Islamic theologians from the Middle Ages on to the modern age have divided the world into the house of war and the house of Islam, with the house of Islam having the responsibility to be expanded by the Muslims at the expense of the house of war. We are in the house of war here in the United States. As long as there are people who believe that, then there's going to be conflict between Muslims and non-Muslims. That's unavoidable. Ideas matter. Ideas dictate actions. And people who believe that the supreme God wants them to wage war against and subjugate or kill people who don't believe in that God, they're going to keep coming. What we can do is, therefore, not solve the problem, but we can contain it. The Islamic theology teaches that you don't wage jihad against an enemy you have no chance to defeat. No chance to defeat, meaning more than twice your strength. So what we have to do is be strong. We have to be strong, not just militarily, but societally and culturally, not with these groveling apologies like General Allen gave. He had a chance when the Quran was supposedly desecrated. He had a chance to stand up and say, in America, we believe in freedom of expression. We put up with each other, even if we have fundamental disagreements about important, life-changing principles. Because we understand that to live in a pluralistic society, you have to put up with people who don't believe the same way you do and are willing to be offended without resorting to violence. And that is a principle we are bringing to Afghanistan. And instead, he acted as if he was already a believer in Islam and submitted to the idea that Quran desecration was some heinous crime, when if it had been a Bible, everybody would have shrugged and gone on. And so we have to stand for our own principles. And if we do that, I believe that there are even many Muslims who will want to live in a society that stands for and defends the freedom of speech and the equality of rights of all people before the law. We didn't do that in Iraq and Afghanistan. We enshrined Islamic law as the highest law of the land in both. If we stood for our principles, I think that would be one major thing. If we stood strong and worked to contain the threat, so that in Muslim countries they might be waging jihad, but they can't get over here to do it, then we could secure generations of peace for ourselves and for our children.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Elvis, UC Berkeley. I wanted to thank you for your courage to
I
speak
love your
out
records.
against.
Thank you. Sorry. Couldn't resist.
Thank you for your courage
Thank
to
you.
speak out against political correctness and our enemy. I wanted to ask, why do you think we're ignoring the genocide of Christians? And two, do you think our president's a Muslim?
We're ignoring the genocide of Christians. We're ignoring the. I'm going to wait for that one. We're ignoring the genocide of Christians because it's not politically correct to recognize it. It is inconvenient for the president to recognize it because listen, there's a concerted effort after every jihad terror attack to portray Muslims as the victims of it. They kill us and it's our fault. And Obama is completely in line with this way of thinking. So, in other words, they kill us, they commit a jihad terror attack, and we say, you see how we're discriminating against Muslims and we have to be nicer to them. And then these things would stop. And this is an extraordinary myopia that is based on, once again, the assumption that Islam is completely benign and peaceful. And so if they are mad at us, it must be some mean thing we've done to them that we have to cut out doing. Now, the idea that they are victimizing Christians by the hundreds of thousands and millions doesn't fit with that paradigm. And so it has to be ignored. Is the president a Muslim? You know, he doesn't answer my emails. He doesn't return my phone calls. So I don't know for sure. I know this, that he certainly was a Muslim. There's no doubt about that, because his father and his stepfather were both Muslims, and Islam is patrilinear. That is, if your father's a Muslim, you're a Muslim. He was raised a Muslim. He himself says it in his first autobiography. It's a wild thing. The president, before he was even president, wrote 2 autobiographies. And in his first autobiography, he says he got in trouble in Indonesia for making faces during Quran class. Non-Muslims didn't go to Quran class in Indonesia. So that was an admission that he was a Muslim in school in Indonesia. As a matter of fact, his school registration form has been published. You can find it online. And he's registered in school as a Muslim. So he was one. Now he says he's a Christian. And so I have no reason to doubt that, but I think that it's very clear from his foreign policy and his domestic policy, which has been completely in line with the Muslim Brotherhood agenda, that he has a very great affection for and respect for and regard for Islam, that he thinks it's good for individuals and good for societies, and has done his best to encourage it in every way. Whether or not he himself is a believer in Islam at this point or not, that is undeniable from his record.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ryan Lawson, University of the Cumberlands. I was wondering, assuming we all have our opinion in this room, but assuming our next commander-in-chief's competent again, how would you advise the next commander-in-chief to go about not only eliminating the ISIS and the other groups of terror and their members, but preventing members in the future jihadis from becoming radicalized?
I would advise the commander-in-chief to, in the first place, send ground troops into Iraq and destroy ISIS once and for all, Iraq and Syria. Not to engage in the futile and self-defeating nation building that tied us up in Iraq and Afghanistan before, and still ties us up in Afghanistan, but just to go and take out ISIS. There will still be jihadis. They will probably do something else, but it will set their movement back in a very severe way. Because the fact that ISIS declared itself the caliphate, the only true government among Muslims, on June 29th, 2014. So that's 2 years now, right? Yes, over 2 years, and they're still there. Nobody has stopped them. Nobody has rolled them back. You know who actually has taken a few cities from them in Iraq? It's not the Iraqi army, it's the Iranians. So that's not to the good either. We need to go in and sweep the Iranians back to Iran and clear out ISIS. That will do a tremendous amount in terms of stymieing the jihad movement. And meanwhile, we have to challenge American Muslim communities to not just condemn terror attacks, but to teach against the ideology represented by ISIS. You know that there's not a single mosque or Islamic school in the United States that has a program to teach young Muslims why they should reject the ISIS understanding of Islam. Now, isn't that weird if they all condemn it? So they have to start putting those programs in. And they need to be honest, transparent, and inspectable programs. And any deviation from that will be treated as sedition, any teaching of Islamic law is higher than American law, or hatred of Jews and Christians and the necessity ultimately to replace the Constitution with Islamic law. These things are taught in American mosques now, and that has to stop and be prosecuted as it can be under American law. And then we need to reconfigure our international alliances, which are still based on the Cold War. I have news for you. The Soviet Union is gone. So we should stop pretending that Pakistan and Turkey are our allies. They are not in any way our allies. They have not acted like our allies in years. And they're only considered our allies because they're next to the former Soviet Union. Well, it's over. What we need to do is have an anti-jihad alliance with Putin and others. And Putin has asked for this. Now, you might say, no, wait a minute, Putin is a scoundrel. He's a terrible guy. He took Crimea from Ukraine, etc., etc. All that is granted. But we allied with Stalin, who was infinitely worse than Putin, against Hitler. So I don't see what's the big deal about allying with Putin against the jihadis. Anyway, even aside from that, we need a reconfiguration of international alliances. Those things, challenging U.S. Muslim communities, reconfigure our international alliances, and going into Iraq only briefly to take out ISIS. Those three things are what I would advise.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for speaking today. I just want to say there's a lot of political correctness about Islam on my campus. The president of my campus is part of the Muslim Student Association, which is affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yes, it is. Where's your campus?
University of Southern Maine.
And they're actually on 600 campuses all over the U.S. and Canada, so you're not alone.
Okay. And I just wanted to, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but chapter 532 of the Quran.
Very familiar.
Okay. And I'll just read it to others, and it says, whoever saves one, it is as if he has saved mankind entirely. So this is a huge argument. I've posted on my Facebook that Islam is not a peaceful religion.
And people give you back 532?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
532 actually in its entirety says this. We warned the children of Israel that whoever kills one innocent person has killed all of humanity, and whoever saves one innocent person has saved all of humanity. But even after that, they were wanton transgressors. That's all of 532. So in the first place, it's not a general principle. It's not a principle given to the Muslims as an axiomatic thing that applies to everybody, that if you kill one innocent person, you've killed all of mankind. It's only a warning to the Jews. And then it's bawling the Jews out for violating it. So it's really just another passage, of which there are many in the Quran, saying how terrible the Jews are. Not only that, but 533, the immediately subsequent verse, says, whoever wages war against Allah and his messenger should be crucified, or his hands and feet amputated on opposite sides, or exiled from the land. And so, if you read the whole passage, it is saying, look how terrible the Jews are. We told them to be nice and not kill people, and they still kill people. And whoever wages war against Allah and his messenger, meaning in this context the Jews, you should crucify them or cut off their hands and feet on opposite sides. So it's actually an extraordinarily violent and anti-Semitic passage, from which this one little bit is often taken. Whoever kills one innocent person has killed all of mankind, in order to mislead people into thinking that Islam is a religion of peace. This is why it's very important that we educate ourselves about the motivating ideology of the enemy, because they are master deceivers, and they are deceiving the American people right now in hundreds of ways, large and small, and this is a prime example of it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yep, Anthony Camargo from University of Redlands. So obviously there's a lot of anti-Israel bias on campus. There's a lot of defense of Sharia law on campus. From a student activist perspective, what are some things that myself and my fellow students can do to help educate the people who defend Sharia law and try to change their perspectives to come to our side?
Turn their assumptions against them. Turn their claims against them. This is very difficult because you're going to be a small minority, and I understand that. But here are just a few ideas that you can take or leave, but consider. Quran Awareness Week. The Muslim Students Association has Islam Awareness Week about how wonderful Islam is and peaceful. So you have Quran Awareness Week. What could they object? They want you to read the Quran, don't they? And so then you have out there, chapter 9, verse 29, fight against those who do not obey Allah and his messenger, and do not forbid what he has forbidden, even if they are of the people of the book, that's the Jews and the Christians, until they pay the jizya, the tax, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Slay them wherever you find them, chapter 9, 5, 2, 191 and 489. When you meet the unbelievers, strike their necks, behead them, chapter 47, verse 4. And all these passages, good women are obedient. As for those that are not, give them a warning, send them to separate beds, and beat them. Chapter 4, verse 34. And just lay it all out there. Have big signs. Quran Awareness Week. And have these quotes from the Quran.
It's awesome.
I thought you guys wanted us to be aware of Islam. Here it is. Have... Women's Rights Week. They're all about women's rights, right? And so you have that same, the wife-beating verse, chapter 4, verse 34 of the Quran. You have Aisha, Muhammad's child bride, his favorite wife, saying, I have not seen women suffer like the believing women. Excuse me. I have not seen women suffer like the believing women suffer. Because they're getting beat up by their husbands, you see. You have all kinds of things. I can give you the material on how women are mistreated, on genital mutilation, on honor killing, on all kinds of things that are rooted in Islam. And people say, look how racist and hateful and Islamophobic you are. And you say, wait a minute, we're just talking about you're not for women's rights? I thought you guys were all about women's rights. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And turn it all back to them. It can be done. But you have to have a group of people that are courageous enough to do it. I'm not saying you're not, but it's very hard. I understand how hard it is on college campuses today because there are 90 of them and 10 of you, and they are growing increasingly aggressive and violent. And you have to live there for 4 years. And so I understand the problems, but if you have a certain devil-may-care attitude about it, and you are able to make sure that what you're doing is not going to result in your own brutalization or worse, then there are all kinds of ways you can expose their hypocrisy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Hoffman from Southwestern Assembly of God University. First of all, thank you for your courage, because I know this puts a target on your head. The question I have is, in the decades prior to 9/11, hundreds of billions of dollars were used to promote this radical extremism in Islam, and I guess you could argue it's still occurring through Saudi Arabia. So really we're seeing the fruit of past decades beginning to sprout now. So the concern that I have is what is there that can really be done to, maybe other than a miracle like a Christian revival in the Middle East and in these countries, to stand against this type of Islam, which is really the result of hundreds of billions of dollars, even 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Where did those hundreds of billions of dollars come from?
Saudi Arabia.
Where'd they get them?
Us.
Right. How did we pay them?
Oil? Or
when we
money
filled
for
up our gas tanks, right? Got to have it. Everybody's got to have a car, unless you live in a great city. And so we are financing this. On September 12, 2001, President George W. Bush should have announced offshore drilling, fracking, pipelines, everything to free us from foreign policy dependence upon the Saudis. And a massive effort with the best minds of the country devoted to finding alternative energy sources. Should have been done then. It ought to be done now. And if we do it and we choke off their money pipeline, then a lot of the problem is solved. They have already spent hundreds of billions of dollars, certainly, and it's a lot worse than it would have been if it had been done then. But they're getting all this from our oil money. We have to stop giving it to them. Of course, same thing goes for Iran, which is actually the leading state sponsor of terrorism, while the Saudis have been the leading propagator of the ideology. And Iran just got billions of dollars in sanctions relief, hundreds of billions. Well, that was a drastic mistake, because immediately all the clients of Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and so on, they all got a massive boost in their budgets. If we can't get that money back, but we can stop financing our own destruction now. Yes, ma'am.
Morgan Elliott from the University of Tennessee. Earlier you stated that right now we can't tell the difference in the jihadists coming in and the traditional refugees. Donald Trump is proposing a ban on all Muslims and the deportation of the refugees that we have right now. Do you think that's the best approach to keep America safe?
It's very problematic, but I'll tell you one thing. All the people are very upset. You know, the whole world was upset with Donald Trump for suggesting this. And there was even a call for him to be banned from entering Great Britain because he dared to suggest this. And he was compared very frequently to Hitler. Now, if you think about that for a minute, Hitler stopped the emigration of Jews so that he could keep them in Germany and kill them. Trump wants to stop the immigration of Muslims so that jihadis won't kill us. Those are not really quite equivalent things. Also, and more importantly, none of the people calling him Hitler and saying it's such a terrible idea and the worst thing that's ever been suggested have come up with an alternative solution. Nobody. The Obama administration says, well, don't worry, we'll vet the refugees. I already told you about Tashfin Malik. I didn't tell you that the Obama administration has already vetted jihad groups in Syria because they want to take out the Islamic State. And of course, there are not American troops there to do that. They want to empower local forces to do that. And so they found this group that they decided were moderates, and they've given them U.S. taxpayer money and weapons. And that group, you can look this up, it was just last week, they captured an 11-year-old boy that they accused of being a spy and beheaded him and took a lot of pictures of them smiling with the beheaded boy before and after. And were very proud of themselves and were screaming Allahu Akbar as they did it. These are the moderates that were vetted by the Obama administration. So how good are they going to be at determining the jihadis from the peaceful refugees? So Trump's solution is very difficult because it obviously will keep people out of the country who might be very great benefits to the United States. At the same time, nobody else has proposed an alternative. And there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that if this Muslim migrant influx continues, there will be more jihad terror attacks in the United States. There's just no doubt about that whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
The proponents of this immigration influx would rather see Americans dead than be politically incorrect. Yes, sir.
Are you concerned that even if we expose Quranic verses to these leftists and reveal the true nature of Islam, they'll still be reluctant to criticize it for the sake of multiculturalism, and it won't really have much of an effect at all?
Oh, I have no doubt whatsoever. You're not going to change their minds. The social justice warriors on your campus are going to be social justice warriors, and that's just what they're going to do. You might make one of them think, but probably not. The people you're trying to reach by doing that are the people who haven't really thought about these things and are swayed by what the social justice warriors are telling them. And you expose the hypocrisy and the intellectual vacuity of what they're saying. And you win over, the objective would be, win over large segments of the campus people who just are ordinary students who are thinking about things, and they're going to grow up and be voters in America, and you want to win them over.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry that this is a little ambiguous, but what would you say is the modus operandi, the MO of those on the left, like capitulating to the epitome of what's going to destroy Western civilization?
I think that this is what they want to do. In 2008, Barack Obama was seen during his campaign avidly reading a book called The Post-American World by Fareed Zakaria, the CNN guy. And the Post-American World essentially says that the problem in the world is America. America being the sole superpower is what's caused the trouble in the world. And what we need to do is weaken America militarily, politically, and economically so that we're all essentially at the same level in the world, and then nobody will have any reason to hate America because it won't be standing out among the nations. It'll just be another one. And nobody will have any reason to hate anybody because we'll all be the same and there will be world peace. Now, if you think about it, in terms of what Barack Obama's done over the last 7.5 years, that does seem to me to be his program.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Trevor Wiegert, University of Nebraska, Kearney. My question, a lot of times you hear that like the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE especially are very peaceful advocacy groups, and if you think otherwise, you're Islamophobic. But obviously that's not the case, and we've even seen things here like the unearthing of the civilization jihad that's been underway for quite some time. What are some problems you see moving forward here in the next few years that these groups will continue to bring, and do you see them getting, should I say, more violent instances in the United States?
I don't see CARE being violent. That's not their MO. CARE is, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is a subversive organization that poses as a civil rights group, but actually what it's trying to do is position itself so that it can oppose and obstruct counterterror efforts. And that's what it's done. Its claim to be a neutral civil rights organization is universally taken for granted by the media, and it has great access in government and law enforcement, despite having been named an unindicted co-conspirator in a Hamas terror funding trial back in 2007, 9 years ago now. They should have had no government access after that. But it was revealed recently that they met with the U.S. government officials, Obama administration officials, 325 times in 2015. That's almost every day. And this is a group with demonstrable ties that have been established by the Justice Department to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. So this is the kind of establishment thinking I've been talking about. If there is a sane administration in Washington, it has to completely remove CARE from any access to government and law enforcement. And there was actually an investigation of CARE that was shut down by the Obama administration when it first came into power, into office. And so that investigation needs to be restarted and the organization closed if it is determined to be engaging in subversive activities.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, John Mayer from Liberty University. You had President Obama respond to Donald Trump's, he would call it an attack on Islam and the religion, and he said, quote, "There's no magic phrase to radical Islam. It's a political talking point, not a strategy." If that's the case, why doesn't he just say the words?
Yeah, if it doesn't matter, why is it so important that he not say it? It's absolutely true. It doesn't make any sense. He's saying on the one hand that it doesn't matter, and yet he seems to assume that it matters a great deal and that it will turn the whole Islamic world against us. What he says actually is this, that he explained during that same tirade, he explained that he was not going to empower Al-Qaeda and ISIS by calling them Islamic, that it would validate them in the eyes of Muslims around the world if he called them Islamic. Now think about that. Do you think that there is a young man anywhere in the world today who was about a young Muslim, and he's reading the Quran and he's seeing what ISIS is doing and he decides to join ISIS, but then Barack Obama says they're not Islamic, and so he says, "Oh, I won't join." John Kerry said they weren't Islamic, so I will turn away. It's ridiculous. The Muslim youth who are joining ISIS are looking to Muslim leaders and to the Quran and Muhammad to tell them what Islam is. They are not looking to avowedly non-Muslim political leaders to tell them what Islam is. It's ridiculous. It would be like young Christians in the United States saying, "Well, I was going to join this Christian group, but then Ayatollah Khamenei told me they weren't Christian, and so I'm not going to do it." It's absolutely absurd. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, my name is Bhumia Patton, and I am a Muslim Afghan American. As we know, there are about 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and many of which are Muslim Americans like myself that will live and die for this country, including my friends who are right now in the military to protect us from the terrorist groups. So what I would like to know is how can we make sure that we're not marginalizing Muslim Americans' voices or committing hate crimes against them in America while fighting those terrorist groups, which are a huge problem because 90% of their victims or the people that they have killed are Muslims in the Middle East.
Thanks. This is very important. No hate crime is ever justified. And I noticed that you're not wearing a headscarf. And of course, Muhammad commanded that women cover everything but their face and hands. And there have been so many women brutalized by Muslims for not wearing it that I certainly would hope that you're protected from that. Hate crimes are never excusable, never justified under any circumstances. And FBI statistics actually show that Jews are the most common victim of hate crimes in the United States, about 8 times more common than hate crimes against Muslims. Meanwhile, hate crime statistics published by groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations and others have been found to be faked to a tremendous degree, including incidents that never happened or incidents that were trumpeted as hate crimes that turned out not to be. Most notably, for example, the murder of a woman, a Muslim woman, a few years back in California. It turned out that she was murdered by her husband because I think he wanted to go with another woman or something. I don't remember exactly the details. But what he did was he left a note by her body saying, "You foreigners have to get out of our country and you're all terrorists," and so on. And so it was trumpeted all over the world as being an Islamophobic hate crime that was committed against an innocent Muslim woman. The real story was that the husband was using the hate crime fabrication in order to cover up his own murder. The problem with the hate crime statistics that are published by CARE and these other groups is that all too often they do traffic in that kind of deception. And so while it is absolutely true that we need to be resolute in condemning any kind of vigilante violence against any group, especially those that are most victimized, Jews and blacks, African Americans, at the same time, we have to recognize that the charge of Islamophobia and the claim that Muslims in the United States are being marginalized is a political tool that is being used by groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations in order to intimidate people into thinking that there's something wrong with resisting and opposing jihad terror. And of course, I'm absolutely confident that you condemn such efforts, but we have to be very vigilant about them because they're very sophisticated and they have the complete support of the mainstream media in this kind of deception. The difficulty is in distinguishing between genuine counter-terror efforts and what is genuine bigotry and hatred. The problem is that Islamic advocacy groups in the US have consigned any opposition to jihad terror to bigotry and hatred in an effort to stigmatize all of it and to make us afraid of speaking out. And that we have to resist. I'm sure that you would agree. One thing in closing, the most notorious example of that was a few years back there was a jihad plot at Fort Dix in New Jersey. And a group of 6 young Muslims was going to go into Fort Dix and kill as many American soldiers as possible, and then they themselves be killed, gaining the promise of paradise to those who kill and are killed. And the plot was foiled. The plot was foiled because the jihadis, they liked to watch jihad videos, gory videos of bloodshed, beheadings, the whole 9 yards. But they had them on VHS tapes. Do you remember those? And so they wanted to get them on DVD. They took them into a video store and they asked this young man, "Can you transfer our VHS tapes to DVD?" And he said, "Sure." And so he's doing it. Apparently, I don't know how it works, but apparently it involved him seeing what was on the tapes. And so he's seeing all this blood and gore, and he got concerned. And so he went to his manager, and he said, "Dude, I'm seeing some weird stuff on these tapes. Should I go to the police, or would that be racist?" Now you see the problem. Should I go to the police, or would that be racist? Now, there was nothing racist about this. I didn't tell you, but the 6 Muslims who were doing this were Albanians. They were Albanian Muslims who had grown up in the United States. They were white guys. So there was nothing racist about it, even on the face of things. But he had been so intimidated and so indoctrinated over so many years, his whole life, with the idea that resistance to Islamic terror is racism and bigotry and Islamophobia, that he was afraid that if he went to the police about an obvious group of jihad terrorists, that it would be a racist act. That's what we have to guard against. And that is much more of a prevailing problem than any marginalization of Muslims in the United States. Muslims in the United States are freer than they are in any country in the world, and that's the way it ought to be, in any Muslim country in the world. And this is the way that it ought to be. You're free not to wear a headscarf here, whereas in Afghanistan, you would probably be immediately killed. And so I'm very glad that you're able to enjoy these freedoms in the United States, and I hope you do so for the rest of a long and prosperous life. Thank you very much.